story, A Love Unseen. Chapter 1, The Encounter. Emily Walker had never imagined she would find herself back in this small coastal town. She had left years ago, eager to chase dreams of city life, leaving behind the familiar faces, the predictable rhythms of small-town existence. But now, after a decade of chasing something she couldn't quite name, she was back. Life had a way of pushing people where they least expected, and for Emily, the city had lost its appeal. The relentless pace, the suffocating crowds, the never-ending rush. It had worn her down until she no longer recognized herself. So she returned, hoping that perhaps in this quiet town, she could rediscover the pieces she had lost. The town hadn't changed much since she'd left. The same cobblestone streets, the same weathered storefronts, the same faces, older now, but still recognizable. She walked through the narrow streets one afternoon, reacquainting herself with the place she had once called home. It was then that she stumbled upon the local art gallery, a quaint space tucked between a cafe and a bookstore. Something about the soft light filtering through the windows drew her in. Inside, the walls were adorned with paintings, landscapes of the sea, portraits filled with emotion. One painting, in particular, caught her eye. A solitary figure standing on the shore, the wind whipping around them as they stared out at the vast expanse of water. It was haunting and beautiful, filled with a quiet sadness that resonated with something deep inside her. "That's one of Lucas Hale's works," a voice said from behind her. Emily turned to see an older woman, the gallery's owner, standing nearby. "Lucas Hale?" she repeated, the name unfamiliar. The woman nodded. "He's a local artist. Lives a bit on the outskirts of town. Doesn't come around much. But his work, well, it speaks for itself." Emily nodded absently, her eyes still fixed on the painting. There was something about it, something that felt personal, as if the artist had poured his soul into it. She lingered for a moment longer before thanking the woman and stepping back outside into the crisp autumn air. She didn't think much of the artist then, only that his work had left an impression. Little did she know, fate had a way of bringing people together, often in the most unexpected ways. Chapter 2. Fate intervenes. It wasn't long after that Emily found herself crossing paths with Lucas Hale again. She'd taken a job at the local library, a small but charming building nestled near the heart of town. It wasn't what she had planned when she returned, but it felt right. Surrounded by books, the scent of old paper and polished wood, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The work was simple, organizing shelves, helping the occasional visitor find a specific title, cataloging new arrivals. But it gave her time to think, time to breathe. One afternoon, she noticed a man standing near the entrance of the library, a stack of wood and tools in hand. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that fell in soft waves. There was something about his presence, quiet yet commanding. He seemed familiar, but it wasn't until he stepped inside that recognition struck her. Lucas Hale, the librarian, Mrs. Green, called from behind the desk. "Good to see you again." Emily watched as Lucas nodded, his eyes briefly meeting hers before he turned to Mrs. Green. "I'm here for the shelves," he said, his voice low but steady. Ah, he was here for the renovations, Emily realized. The library had needed new shelves for months, and it seemed Lucas was the one to do the job. She observed him as he set to work, his movements precise, methodical. There was a quiet intensity about him, the same intensity she had felt in his painting. She found herself drawn to it, though she couldn't quite explain why. Over the next few days, their paths crossed frequently. Lucas was often at the library, working on the shelves in the afternoons when the space was quiet. Emily, who had grown used to the stillness, found herself stealing glances at him as she went about her tasks. He was always focused, his expression serious, as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. One afternoon, as she was sorting through a pile of books, Lucas approached her. His hands rough from work, yet his voice gentle when he spoke. "You're the new librarian, right?" Emily looked up, startled. "Oh, yes, Emily Walker. I just started a few weeks ago." Lucas nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary before he returned to his work. It was a brief exchange, but something about it left Emily feeling unsettled. There was something about Lucas, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. He was a man of few words, yet there was a depth to him that intrigued her. She had a feeling there was more to him than met the eye, and she couldn't help but wonder what stories he carried with him. Chapter 3: Cracks in the Armor. As the days turned into weeks, Emily and Lucas found themselves sharing more quiet moments in the library. Though their conversations were sparse, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a mutual respect for the silence that enveloped their interactions. But with each passing day, Emily sensed the walls Lucas had built around himself, walls that seemed impenetrable. She could see the cracks, those small glimpses of vulnerability that surfaced when he thought no one was watching. One afternoon, as they stood in the library's back room, Emily gathered the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind since the day she first saw his painting. "Your art," she began hesitantly. It's beautiful. But there's a sadness to it. Is that why you stopped?" Lucas froze, his hand stilling on the piece of wood he was sanding. For a moment, Emily thought he wouldn't answer, but then he let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging slightly. "I didn't stop," he said quietly. "I just lost the will to continue." Emily waited, sensing there was more he wanted to say. When he didn't, she pressed gently. "What happened?" He was silent for a long moment, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and filled with a grief she hadn't expected. "I lost someone, my wife. After she died, nothing mattered anymore. Not the art, not this town, not anything." Emily's heart ached at his confession. She hadn't known, hadn't realized the depth of his pain. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, unsure of what else to say. Lucas didn't respond. Instead, he picked up his tools and returned to his work, the conversation over as quickly as it had begun. But something had shifted between them, and Emily knew that, in that moment, Lucas had let her see a part of himself he hadn't shown anyone in a long time.